The Inner Awakening Project. Awakening.
Okay, grab your gear because we are diving straight into this explainer, and today we're playing the role of archaeologists. I want you to imagine we are standing right at the edge of the ultimate excavation site, getting ready to uncover the deep, silent mysteries of the Indian subcontinent. We're talking about a time long before kings carved their names into stone monuments, long before religions even had official names. Something incredibly ancient was stirring here, and we're going to dig through the layers of time to unearth a world that existed way, way before history was ever actually written down.
Now you might be wondering, what actually happens when a civilization of an absolutely massive scale just vanishes into the earth? I mean, unlike the pharaohs in Egypt with their towering pyramids and easily identifiable hieroglyphs, the people we're about to study left us with these brilliantly advanced ruins, but an entirely undeciphered script. No grand temples, no giant statues of rulers. It's like a giant puzzle, practically an archaeological thriller, and we are looking for the missing pieces of human history.
So think of this as our excavation map. We'll start at the very surface of prehistory with early nature rituals about 10,000 years ago, and then we'll dig down to 7,000 BCE to find the first settled communities in Mehrgar. From there, we hit the incredible emergence of the Indus Valley around 3300 BCE, see its peak at 2600 BCE with megacities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, and finally, we'll confront its mysterious decline starting around 1900 BCE.
All right, let's get into Section 1, the surface, prehistory. Fear, survival, and early questions.
Before we can even start digging into the physical ruins, we really need to try and understand the minds of early humans 10,000 years ago. Imagine standing out there beneath an endless pitch-black night sky. You don't have science to explain the terrifying storms rolling across the horizon, right? Humans lived incredibly close to fear of drought, floods, predators. So early spiritual philosophy, it didn't start as some organized religion. It was basically an emotional survival response to the terrifying beauty of nature. Sacred fire was absolutely crucial. It literally protected families from darkness and whatever was lurking in it. Unpredictable rivers were revered because the whole community depended on them to stay alive. The mountains felt eternal, standing perfectly still while entire human generations came and went. And the sun and the moon, they offered certainty, warmth, and a way to track the tides. People were desperately searching for meaning in the elements themselves.
Moving down a layer. Section 2, Trench 1, Unearthing Mehrgar, the Shift to Permanence.
Scraping away the topsoil here in modern-day Balochistan, around 7000 BCE, we find something game-changing, the shift to permanence. Humans were finally moving away from constant hunting and gathering, and as they settled down to farm, they built permanent communities and, this is key, a shared memory. With permanence comes tradition. We start finding complex death rituals, and the burial goods they left behind suggest they were already thinking about an afterlife. It's right here in the dirt that we see the deepening relationship between humanity and spirituality, leaving us the first scattered fragments of a civilization trying to figure out its place in the universe.
Deeper still. Section 3, Trench 2, The Silent Indus Cities, a megacity mystery.
Digging into our second trench, taking us to 3300 BCE, we hit a bedrock fact that is just staggering. 1 million. Let that number sink in for a second. That is the square kilometers this civilization spanned. That makes it vastly larger than both ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia at their absolute peaks. Think about that scale. We are unearthing a sprawling ancient empire of dust stretched across the northwestern regions of the subcontinent, just quietly waiting to tell its story.
And as we sift through the dust of cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, what we find is mind-blowing. This was a society of staggering urban planning, flourishing all the way until 1900 BCE. We're talking impossibly precise urban street grids laid out with intense mathematical care. They had sophisticated indoor drainage systems, something totally unseen in many parts of the world for millennia after. We uncover massive centralized granaries for food storage, meaning huge populations were living inside humanity's earliest urban experiments. And get this, they use standardized bricks across hundreds of miles. You don't get that without highly advanced coordinated governance.
But here is where it gets kind of spooky. Look at the stark contrast. Over in Egypt and Mesopotamia, they left us these loud, giant monuments to kings, towering temples, and texts we can actually read today detailing their laws and religions. But the Indus Valley people? They left us brilliant, incredibly advanced ruins, sure, but their script is completely undeciphered, despite decades of us trying to crack it.
The rulers remain utterly unknown to us. It leaves this haunting, profound silence over the whole site. We know exactly how they built their world, but we don't even know their names.
Which brings us to Section 4, the artifacts, clues of unknown gods.
Because we don't have texts, as archaeologists, we have to rely entirely on the artifacts we physically pull from the earth. Take this famous piece of clay, for example, the Proto-Shiva seal. It sparks massive heated debate in the archaeological community. Is this an early, echoing prototype of the later Hindu god Shiva, or is it just a really fascinating coincidence? It shows this horned figure, seated cross-legged, in what sure looks like an early meditative or yogic posture. And because he's surrounded by animals, some scholars see the early echoes of Shiva, known as the Lord of Animals and Transformation. But others? They caution us against reading too much into a visual coincidence separated by thousands of years from those later traditions. Then, when we excavate monumental structures like the Great Bath, we see these undeniable hints of spiritual water cleansing. This is a carefully constructed brick water reservoir right in the middle of Mohenjo-Daro, and it points really strongly to early sacred purification rituals. And what's absolutely captivating about this is how water purification and sacred bathing become so central to later life in the subcontinent, especially surrounding rivers like the Ganges. So, are we looking at the very beginning of that sacred timeline right here in the brickwork?
Let's look at the collapse in Section 5, the shifting earth, decline in the lost Saraswati.
The deeper we dig into this timeline, the more the narrative shifts. Because around 1900 BCE, these magnificent cities began to empty out. And actually, scratch the idea of a massive, sudden war or an invasion ending them. The evidence points to a slow, devastating ecological collapse brought on by shifting rivers and climate change. We see geological proof of rivers violently shifting their natural courses. That climate instability severely damaged their critical agriculture. Without surplus food, you see a weakening of their vital long-distance trade networks. It's a domino effect, leading to a gradual decentralization until these massive urban centers simply faded back into the dust.
And this ecological shift points us toward one of the absolute greatest geological mysteries of the region, matching the massive, legendary Saraswati River, which is sung about in ancient hymns, to actual dried riverbeds found in modern excavations. See, ancient Vedic literature describes the Saraswati not as some minor stream, but as a mighty, powerful river. For a long, long time, historians thought it was pure myth. But geological evidence has actually found the dried Gagar-Hakar Basin, a massive ancient river system that dried up millennia ago. Finding the physical, geological truth behind an ancient chanted text, that is a thrilling overlap of science and archaeology.
Which leads us to Section 6, the legacy, from ruins to chanted memory.
So the physical cities crumbled, right? But the spiritual landscape of the subcontinent didn't die with them. It radically transformed. And this brings us to probably the most sensitive, fiercely debated topic in this field, tracing the true origins of what would eventually become Hindu philosophy. It all boils down to this. Are we looking at continuity, where traditions organically survived the collapse of the Indus cities? Or is it a coincidence, where entirely new cultures brought these ideas in from the outside?
Now, as impartial investigators, we've got to weigh both sides of the trench here. On one side, you have the organic emergence perspective. They argue for strong continuity, pointing to the Great Bath rituals, those proto-Shiva seals we looked at, and that deep indigenous reverence for the rivers. It makes a lot of visual sense. But on the other side, the merged influences perspective argues that you simply can't ignore the introduction of new languages, the radically shifted geography, and the vast, vast gap in the timeline. They argue the evidence is incomplete and suggest new cultural influences merge with whatever was left of the old. It is a brilliant, ongoing academic puzzle, and truthfully, the jury is still out.
But honestly, what is absolutely certain is that the legacy of this era was preserved not by building new stone monuments, but by the spoken word. They created a system of thought that was flexible enough to survive time itself. A totally transformed landscape emerged where sacred hymns, intense fire rituals, and ancient sounds spread across generations. Think about that. Human memory literally became the temple.
An age preserved not in ruins, but in memory itself. I mean, how powerful is that? Long before massive stone temples or defined named gods became central to worship, the very foundations of cosmic order were being whispered across open skies. It was an era carried forward entirely by the minds of the people, capable of surviving collapsing empires, shifting rivers, and thousands of years of time.
So, as we pack up our brushes and trowels and conclude this explainer, I want to leave you with this one final, lingering thought. How much of human history is still silently waiting in the earth for us to uncover? I mean, if a highly advanced civilization spanning 1,000,000 square kilometers can just be lost to silence for millennia, what else is out there beneath our feet? Keep digging, keep questioning everything, and thank you so much for unearthing these mysteries with me today.